So who is the Russian President Vladimir Putin and why is he waging war against Ukraine? He's made two things very clear. One, a regime change in Ukraine. He does not want Nazis, as he calls them, Nazi oligarchy and corrupt people who are taking Ukraine away from development and letting Ukraine become the playground of the North Atlantic Treaty Organization. So a regime change and demilitarization of Ukraine. So what motivates Vladimir Putin? What's going through his mind? We try and decode in this report.
Who is Vladimir Putin? Former KGB, sometimes Prime Minister, sometimes President of the Russian Federation. His aura is very carefully crafted. In 2012, as he entered Kremlin as the President of Russia, Vladimir V. Putin was walking in once again to continue his rule over Russia. Despite allegations of electoral fraud, Putin was taking over the helms for the third time.
As I fulfill the duties of the President of the Russian Federation,
the journey has been remarkable, from a young spy in the Soviet era to becoming one of the most powerful and feared leaders in the world. No one could have imagined that the breakup of the Soviet Union would create and concentrate so much power into the hands of one person. It is almost as if a Tsar has been reborn in Russia. In 1952, security guard Vladimir Putin and Maria Shalomova had a son. They named him Vladimir, son of Vladimir Putin. Vladimir Vladimirovich grew up in a communal housing on Baskov Lane in St. Petersburg, then called Leningrad. An average student with no remarkable achievement to remember him by, the young Putin finished schooling and went to college to study law. The young boy who had first wanted to be a pilot, then a sailor, got swayed by the idealism of the times and in 1975 joined the Komishet Gosudar Steni Bezopasnosti, or USSR's main security agency, the KGB. It was here that the real talents of Putin got to be recognized. Within months of joining, he was transferred to be trained in the elite counterintelligence division. In 1985, Putin was posted to the KGB headquarters in Dresden, East Germany. A posting that lasted till those heady days of 1990 when the Berlin Wall came down and the German Democratic Republic imploded in the wake of German unification. Putin was there at his KGB headquarters facing a mob when he realized that retaliation of the olden days was no longer possible because Moscow had gone silent. From the front line in East Germany, Putin saw how one after another the centrally planned economies of Eastern Europe staggered to disintegration. Out in St. Petersburg, he saw Russia's troubled early transition to a free market democratic system. Lieutenant Colonel Vladimir Putin of the KGB retired in 1991 and made his way back to Leningrad. The future looked bleak as the Soviet Union came crashing down. Putin considered himself lucky when he found work at Leningrad University. He was planning to do his PhD. But Putin soon found himself involved in politics and administration as the now renamed St. Petersburg began to reorient itself in post-Soviet Russian Federation. In 1996, Putin moved to Moscow, to the center of political power. In the next 3 years, his rise was phenomenal as he worked his way through the intrigues and plotting at the heart of Russian presidency. He was soon noticed by Boris Yeltsin, the president of Russia, and the man credited with having struck the final nail in the coffin of the USSR. In early 1997, President Boris Yeltsin appointed Putin Deputy Chief of Presidential Staff. By 1998, he was the director of FSB, Federal Security Services, KGB's new age successor. A year later, when President Boris Yeltsin sacked the government, he replaced his prime minister with Vladimir Putin. On the last day of 1999, as the millennium changed, Vladimir Putin became the acting president of the Russian Federation, and Russia and the world would never be the same again. Putin's no-nonsense reputation and his cold and calculated moves during the Second Chechen War won him much popularity and his first presidential elections.
Early Putin was an economic reformer. He put in a flat tax and went from budget deficits and default rapidly to budget surpluses and debt repayment. But he also ended up having to take on the oligarchs as they rose in power. And in 2003, 2004, he took down the most powerful and politically challenging of the oligarchs. That was an oil tycoon called Mikhail Khodorkovsky. And that spelled a change in the Putin regime, if you like. From then on, he was a tough guy who required unconditional loyalty from the movers and shakers in business and the economy.
Putin remained president for 2 terms, till 2008. And from 2008 to 2012, he was prime minister, and then president again. In 2014, Russia under Putin intervened in a political unrest in Ukraine and then annexed Crimea. Putin, it seemed, was busy bringing back Russia's authority in the global power scenario. While his approval rates peaked to an all-time high on home turf, the Ukraine intervention isolated him at the global power table. G8 and G20 summits ostracized him. Europe and America were on high alert. Putin, over the years, through his various terms as president and prime minister at Kremlin, had changed Russia and its role in world politics. The West had tried to rein in his international meddling by imposing economic sanctions against Russia. But Putin managed to keep Russia relevant and cultivated a loyal following within his country. In the process of regaining Russia's lost influence over the world, Putin also earned for himself the sobriquet of an autocrat. Western media began referring to him as Tsar Putin. And Putin made clear his dislike for his critics and the Western powers and their media houses.
He's a brilliant speaker. He's a fantastic mastery of detail. His repartee is first rate. He can speak technocratically, but he can also resort to barrack room insults that are often shocking if you translate them into English word for word. He was once asked about what Russia should do to Islamist militants who wage attacks, and he said they should be rounded up and put in the outhouse and rubbed out. He used a kind of mafia slang. Mochit v sortirie is to give these guys a wet job in the outhouse, that he said at an international press conference during a foreign visit. So Putin is a master of detail, he's a master of communication, and he understands instinctively and skillfully how to control information and the security apparatus to strengthen his position and consolidate it.
In September 2015, Russia joined Syria's President Bashar al-Assad's forces to fight the extremist Islamic State. But Putin's true motives were soon questioned. Reports of Russian airstrikes targeting many of Assad's enemies, rebel groups in Syria's civil war, started surfacing. As Europe and the world grappled with new extremism under the banner of ISIS, the most powerful country in the world geared up to elect its own leader. Putin, it seems, had found his proverbial golden fleece.
If he says great things about me, I'm going to say great things about him.
Some say it's fabricated, some deny it, some say it's overreaction, and some believe it. But whether in the US, Europe, Middle East, or anywhere else in the world, there is no denying the fact that there is the influence of Vladimir Vladimirovich Putin.
During his campaign, presidential hopeful Donald Trump more than once stated that he had never met Vladimir Putin. There has always been speculations that it were the Russian financiers from inside Putin's circle who bankrolled many of Donald Trump's ventures, even those outside Russia. This was particularly so because most American banks had stopped extending credit to Trump after his multiple bankruptcies. When Trump began planning his White House campaign, he compared Barack Obama with Vladimir Putin, praising the Russian president for his intelligence. He told the American voters that if he became the president, he would get along very well with Russia under Putin. Putin, on his part, reciprocated by praising candidate Trump. Putin called Trump a lively and colorful man, talented without doubt. Moscow cheered Trump's victory as he continued to brush off reports of brutality by Putin's Kremlin, as well as claims that it interfered in the US elections. But US intelligence agencies published a report in January 2017 which said Vladimir Putin ordered an influence campaign in 2016 aimed at the US presidential election. Russia's goals were to undermine public faith in the US democratic process, denigrate Secretary Clinton, and harm her electability and potential presidency. We further assess Putin and the Russian government developed a clear preference for President-elect Trump. When Washington expelled 35 Russian diplomats after this accusation, no US diplomats were expelled in the expected tit-for-tat norms of diplomacy. Vladimir Putin chose not to retaliate. He knew that in less than a month, his friend Trump would be in office and things would change. When President Trump was interviewed on the American TV channel Fox News, he defended Putin when asked why he was supporting a killer.
Do you respect Putin?
I do respect him.
Do you?
But
Why?
Well, I respect a lot of people.
Putin's a killer.
A lot of killers. We got a lot of killers. Why, you think our country's so innocent?
Putin's influence on world politics is beyond question. In December 2016, for the third time in a row, Vladimir Putin topped the Forbes list of most influential people in the world. The list is made of 74 names, one for every 100 million people in the world. And the list is compiled on the basis of how much power they wield over people, how much financial resources they control, whether they have influence in more than one sphere, and what are they doing with this power in trying to change the world. And Putin tops the list.
Under Obama, Washington remained wary of Putin and Russian influence and interference in countries like Syria, Cuba, Iran, and Venezuela. Russia, on its part, was angry with NATO's expansion into Eastern Europe. The Eastern Bloc was breaking away from its traditional alliance with Moscow.
His goal is to restore the greatness, make Russia great again, if you like. He has, though, with the Ukraine adventure, moved beyond what I always thought was a very risk-averse attitude towards foreign policy. He's become more of a gambler, and his actions in Syria are really, really very direct. He's using a lot of firepower, dropping a lot of bombs, causing massive number of human casualties, and you know, taking pretty serious risks. But he wants to extend his influence into the Mediterranean and maybe establish a permanent presence there. So I think he really is doing offense, first of all, from a defensive mindset.
So Putin, in retaliation, has been gunning for a weaker Europe.
I think he really does function on a zero-sum view of the world. he's a tit-for-tat guy. You stop trying to promote democracy and colour revolutions in my backyard and I'll leave you alone.
Under Putin, Russia's foreign policy seems aimed at regaining world dominance. The annexation of Crimea, the conflict in Ukraine, the military operations in Syria, they all challenge the post-Cold War world order. A top aide of Putin, once addressing the Valdai Discussion Club in 2014, said that Russians believe that without Putin, there is no Russia. Stanislav Belkovsky, a Russian political analyst, said that Russia's search for the national idea is finally over after the breakup of the Soviet Union, because now Russia's national idea is Vladimir Vladimirovich Putin.
Well, that is all we have time for on this special broadcast from Mariupol in eastern Ukraine. For all the news and updates, continue to stay with us here on India Today.